Hello and welcome to another episode of Latitude. For too long, the United States has played an unmatched role in world affairs. But with the election of Donald Trump as America's president, there is considerable concern in world capitals now as to what to expect in 2017. But the big question is, can India gain from the new approach that the United States would have on world affairs? Joining us are two eminent experts who are very well informed of India's foreign policy. And we have Dr. Sreeram Chaulia with the Jindal School of International Affairs and the author of a best-selling book on the Prime Minister's foreign policy. Dr. Chaulia, Mr. Prasad mentioned about China, Russia, the United States. Now, where does India figure in all this? Because what we've seen in the recent past is that Russia somehow became more and more part of China's camp, and therefore Russia did take steps which were not seen to be favorable by the Indian establishment, such as engaging more with Pakistan, such as even being a bit reluctant to cite Pakistan's name as a sponsor of terror, as we saw in the BRICS summit. And Russia and China combined could probably end up making an axis with Pakistan, which would clearly push India into a situation where India would have to take sides vis-a-vis these three, and be seen as part of the American camp. Now, do you see that happening, or do you see India emerging as the swing state, as some people have referred to India in world affairs?
I think 2016 has established India as a rising power and a leading power under Prime Minister Modi's leadership, and I see that trend continuing into 2017, irrespective of these dynamics you just mentioned, because on one hand, this binary between a Western camp and a Russian/Chinese camp is being broken because Trump, as you mentioned, is moving towards an informal partnership with Putin. And it looks to me that the old realist strategy was that Russia is not as much of a threat to the West as some of the liberals in the Western society were making it out to be. And Trump, I think, buys that argument. So what it means, I think, there will be greater pressure on China, especially Trump's moves towards Taiwan and all that. So in that sense, we will be favored willy-nilly, because we have a problem with the Chinese in the Indian Ocean region and in our Act East policy, where they've been trying to block our influence and our rise. So to that extent, I'm not that worried that we will be somehow seen as part of the Western camp, because the Russians are not going to be as adversarial to the US as they were under Obama. So the real question really comes down to how we are able to navigate our ties with the Chinese, because the Chinese, I think, will be under significant pressure under Trump administration. Even if the Trump administration does not continue the pivot to Asia policy, there are other means by which I think they are looking at applying pressure on China, and that means it's not a bad outcome at all for India.
Dr. Chaulia, the issue that I wanted you to throw a bit of light on also, that how does this, China is obviously the big elephant in the room, apart from the uncertainty that Mr. Trump has been throwing up. But how does America's pushing China into a kind of shadow boxing situation between America and China in Asia, how does that impact on some of India's initiatives in Asia in general and India's relations with Pakistan in particular?
I'll give you one instance. Just recently, an American underwater drone was captured by the Chinese, and Obama reacted in his traditional, way of, silent diplomacy to extricate from the situation. And Trump was quick to tweet, saying the Chinese stole our vessel.
But then he also said they can take it.
Yeah, they can keep it. But then, the point was, there's certainly a more combative style and a rhetoric at least. And I see that also at least in General Flynn, who's been appointed as his national security advisor. They're going to be more militaristic in some aspects, it looks. And therefore, I think for India, the question is, how much can we leverage this for our advantage without obviously giving up any of our autonomy or somehow becoming a junior partner or being suborned by the US. I think Prime Minister Modi has shown that ability to navigate our own path while leveraging these triangular relationship of USA, China and India to our benefit. And I see more of that happening in the coming year, because Trump, at the end of the day, I think will still find India very valuable for countering terrorism. And for this factor alone, we can clearly see that there's going to be greater convergence between us and Washington. And Modi's ability to have personal chemistry with leaders is famous, and I see no reason why he cannot do even better with Trump than he did with Obama, both of them being conservative leaders. So I think overall, if you see, the Chinese will be, I think, in a position where to some extent they will feel freer, because Trump has limited appetite for great power competition and pushback and that kind of thing. He's not thinking the traditional way of realpolitik. But on the other hand, there are factors which will make them much warier. And I think India will also have a lot of freedom to assert some leadership in the region. If the Americans withdraw and if they become more isolationist, it's an opportunity for us to float new formations and to change the architecture in Asia Pacific.
Right. Dr. Chaulia, quickly to you. 2-3 things about West Asia vis-a-vis our look west policy, which is Pakistan, Afghanistan, etc. Now, West Asia, Mr. Trump has unsettled virtually the whole Arab world, more specifically the Saudis, by very clearly saying that, he's got a problem with America's engagement in West Asia in general, and he's got a problem with Muslims in America in particular. That has unsettled the Islamic world. At the same time, the conflict in Syria, the role of ISIS, has gone through a lot of dramatic change in the last year or more. At the same time, finally, India has turned the corner in somewhat crossing the Lakshman Rekha of not doing enough to tackle Pakistan-sponsored terror with surgical strikes. But that, again, has not put an end to terror attacks from Pakistan, as post-Uri Nagrota has shown. Your thoughts on all these?
Yeah, I think my own prognosis is that Trump's take on the Middle East will continue to strengthen Iran's role. If you read through it carefully, I don't think he's going to abandon the Iran nuclear deal. If at all, there will be some kind of tampering with the terms. And while he's very pro-Israel, I think he's going to, in some ways, continue Obama's line of challenging the Saudis even more, who have been. And during the campaign trail, Trump used to say that Obama created ISIS and Hillary Clinton created ISIS. What he was saying is essentially that Iran and Russia are fighting ISIS and other so-called what he would consider bad guys like al-Nusra and so on. So I think he's going to do some kind of a frontal all-out assault on these groups, and I am hopeful of a settlement in Syria because Putin and Trump seem to be getting along and seem to be on the same wavelength. So what all this means for us is that if Iran is being redeemed and actually being reintegrated into the mainstream even further, it's good news for us because we depend so much on Iran for our own strategic access to Afghanistan and to the rest of Central Asia through Chabahar. So I'm very hopeful that things are going to look better for us strategically in West Asia. As far as the Pakistani strikes go, yeah, I think we have to plug some of the holes and avoid and prevent more of these infiltrations and attacks, and that's how we will be in a stronger position. But again, on this point, I think Trump will tweet one day if we do surgical strikes and say, beautiful.
Thank you very much, sir, for being with us on the show. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye.